Good morning, everyone. My name is Brideson. I'm the Communications and Marketing Director at UniSA. Let's face it, corporate planning is boring. And usually it doesn't involve wristbands or jam tarts and what is a sort of Facebook on speed. So what I want to tell you the story of is how we managed to involve 7,000 people in co-creating plan conversation about our university's future over a continuous 38-hour period. I want to talk about how co-creation and experiment challenged the usual approaches to sticky notes, butcher's paper, fat textures, lecture-style formats of planning workshops, and helped us make decisions from things from our campuses to a new student hoodie. UniJam was not the standard planning workshop involving a few, after which a plan pre-written by senior leadership is released after a suitable hiatus to the many. UniJam was something else. It was a crowdsourced social media type brainstorm conversation open to the whole university community to take part. The Jam answered our new Vice-Chancellor David Lloyd's own initial question about how do I hear what people are thinking. With 5 campuses and an organisation that operates in several countries and with a community of more than 100,000, how do you take the pulse and set new directions? Over 38 hours, we engaged in continuous online conversation. It was co-creation, but from day one, it was also a party. We wanted our planning process to actually be a culture-building moment. Somehow we managed to turn a planning event into something people wanted to attend rather than a diary date to be grudgingly kept. So to engage the student and staff and alumni community, we made our planning process a brand, a verb and a festive form of engagement that was closer to Live Aid or an election campaign. We had balloons and donuts and morning teas. To participate in it, everyone actually had to register for the Jam, so through parties and student roamings along the campuses, analogue communications like posters and ads, as well as social media, we reached out to our community of staff, alumni and students and industry partners. We let our staff be the spokespeople and ambassadors for the conversation that was to occur, and maybe a sense of mystery and lack of information because we seriously hadn't built the platform or set up the discussion areas when we announced we were going to do this Jam actually helped. UniJam was an example of technology-supported co-creation, and the university was actually the first to apply the IBM technology in the Southern Hemisphere, in Australia and in a university. In the end, over a 2-month period of communication, we managed to have 7,500 participants from 60 countries register. All had a voice, and none of this would have fitted in any convention centre or in Adelaide or probably Australia for that matter. And as I say, we chatted for 38 hours. But also when you reflect on the extent of technology involved, our co-creation actually blended the old with the new. In order to manage the conversation with more than 60 VIPs as well, including people like the Lord Mayor and astronauts and others, in addition to our old community, we actually used old media methods. We used a sort of radio talkback structure. Participants could follow a radio schedule that we did actually plan using sticky notes the only time we used them, I promise, on walls outside our Vice-Chancellor's office. And participants could log on to special sessions and chats across several channels over the period. We also built a hub or a national tally room, and a sleepless VC made several films during the 38 hours, and we talked both inside and outside the actual planning conversation through Twitter, Facebook, press statements and e-zine traffic. We reported on the conversation, and in so doing extended that conversation to the non-participating. And of course, this was a side benefit. Co-creation in this form not only got our own community involved, it generated renewed interest in us from others. The Jam conversation went all night long. At no time were there fewer than 500 people logged on. And I should point out that in all that time, we only used the technology to exclude one person. One of the great fears of co-creation is that the inappropriate will be aired or conflict will be created. Our experience actually was the opposite. It didn't eventuate. And the technology enabled us to analyse inputs and connections, to see what comments were most influential, and to facilitate new connections between people. As you can see, we have word clouds and stats and pictures of a conversation. I also make the point, interestingly, that for the democratic picture that I'm trying to present, it was the case that leadership had its role to play, and that burst of sun that you just saw from the network of connections that generated was in fact our CEO. The conversation was led from the top in some ways, but it just didn't stay at the top. Co-creation did give everyone a voice. The introverts spoke as much as the extroverts, and conversations between leaders, academic students, happened around in a workshop format like that would never happen in a room. And real things came out of this, like ideas for a great hall with a new swimming pool were generated and accepted, and I think they would not have been in other circumstances. I actually know the staff member who mused as to whether she was going to throw this idea into the jam or not. It had not been discussed before, and this weekend I think that ad will be placed for the design tender in local papers. The student voice, apart from much related to teaching, also said they wanted new branded clothing lines. One post about a new blue varsity hoodie posted at 9:30 at night generated over 200 responses in about 10 minutes. And using the voting technology in the system, it was voted our quick win from the jam. So immediately my marketing priorities as a marketing director, where I had thought that that was maybe something that wasn't top of my list, changed within those 20 minutes. And we've had to order more stock a dozen times since the range launched in February. And we had a range of quick wins that came out of the conversation that in the last 6 months we've been able to actually implement. And the university community created a new future for the McGill campus, and we actually announced during the jam it wouldn't be closed. To put that in context, we announced our decision on one of our campuses on its future before the corporate plan was actually written and released or approved by council, and before the actual planning conversation had concluded. So our corporate plan, Crossing the Horizon, that came from the jam has more than 50 discrete actions that can all be traced to ideas and conversations among the 7,000 jammers and their 17,000 posts. Consequently, it has a high ownership. Our plan is a noun and a verb and an adjective. And then there is the cultural benefit that so many of the speakers have talked about. Late at night, new relationships between staff were formed and we became a closer institution. Like the marketing manager and governance secretary who found a common hobby in yoga sometime in the early hours of the morning, but had not known much about each other. They all looked at the university and its corporate plan through new eyes and, yes, from a new perspective. Our corporate plan then is also for us a reminder of late night parties with friends. Who would have ever thought of that, of a corporate planning process? So jam means something else now in our institution. It's a way of co-creating that has not stopped, and we're happy for the story to spread. Thank you.